Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Hey guys, thanks for being listeners of the show. Go to dentalimplantpractices.com and find all of our resources. Also find us on Facebook, Dental Implant Practices page on Facebook, and go to iTunes and leave me a review on iTunes so we can help spread the message. Thanks.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Dental Implant Practices podcast. I'm your host, Philip Gordon, and today it's a huge honor for me to introduce Dr. Jack Hahn.
Hi, Philip. Thanks for having us today, and let us talk to you and have an interesting podcast.
So, Dr. Hahn, I'm really interested in learning about your total career history and your involvement with the development of some implant systems. But I'd love to first start with your background as far as where you went to dental school and your early education into implants.
Philip, I went to Ohio State University, undergraduate, and then Ohio State University College of Dentistry, and graduated dental school in 1964. Ohio State, the dental school was run by Dr. Carl Boucher, who specialized in dentures. So the perio diagnosis was remove all remaining teeth. So we had basically no training in perio. And when I got out of school, I got invited to associate in one of the best practices in Cincinnati. But the founder said, I can only use you if you learn something on perio. So try to get as much training, CE courses, whatever, that were available then. And there were two opportunities. One was Boston University had a continuing perio program, similar to the Misch Institute, where we could actually treat patients. It was run under Henry Goldman. And then Michigan had one under Dr. Ramford these were both 10-week programs. So my first basically few years in practice was mostly perio, and then the patients had confidence and wanted to stay with me to do the restorative work. So we started taking perio pros courses from people like Morton Amsterdam and Lenny Abrams. And these are people that you probably don't know about, or this probably even before you were born. But so that was great experience surgically, anyhow, for me.
Great. Now, where did you first learn about implant dentistry?
Well, actually, it was through a patient. I had a new patient come in. She came with her husband, who was an orthopedic surgeon. And I usually go in and ask the patient, introduce myself, and ask him, how can I help you? And she handed me a shoebox with 17 sets of dentures. So I call that the shoebox syndrome. Anyhow, her husband said, she can't wear teeth. It's ruining our lives, our social life. We can't go out. She doesn't want to go to restaurants in public and this and that. What can you do? And I said, I could clean, which would probably go in the shoebox with the rest of them. So he said, well, how about dental implants? I said, oh, those, they don't work. They infect, they reject. That's what we were told in school. So they left. And if you look at it this way, I didn't give her a chance to get rid of her crutches. She left, came in as a dental cripple and left as a dental cripple. So about 6 weeks after that visit, I saw him at a hospital meeting, and he came up to me and he said, you know, Jack, I took my wife to New York, and Dr. Linkow did a subperiosteal implant on her, and it's changed our lives. She eats everything. She goes out. And he said, I watched the procedure, and it was somewhat crude, but it's the future. And he said, if you don't start learning now, you're going to be behind the times. Well, basically, it was kind of early. But coming from somebody who was educated, an orthopedic surgeon, I thought this is a wake-up call. So he said, and this is in 1969, so he said that he made a relationship with Dr. Linkow and that he could get me into his implant course. So the implant course was the Institute Graduate of Dentistry, of Advanced Dentistry, which I thought was a branch of NYU. And it turns out it was in a room above the laundry in Brooklyn. So the course consisted of Dr. Linkow showing slides, and the hands-on was we put a blade implant in a plastic model. And in order to take the course, you had to buy the kit. And the kit consisted of 12 blades, 700 XXL burrs to cut the groove, a channel measure because you measured the depth of the channel, a seating instrument, and a mallet. That was the kit in 12 different shapes of blades. And these were one-piece implants. Anyhow, we were kind of upset that we had to buy the kit, but it made us make a commitment. So I have this kit now. It was in December of 69. I come back to Cincinnati, what am I going to do with the kit? This comes to the point where my first implant, and that happened in March of 1970. A patient came in with her husband, very impeccably dressed, both of them. And I said, again, how can I help you? And she had a bilateral mandibular partial that was wrapped in Kleenex with some Fixodent, some denture adhesive stuck to it. And she put it up on my bracket table. And she said, if I have to live through this the rest of my life, I'll kill myself. And her husband said, and me too. So I said to her, I just took an implant course. I don't know if these things last 10 minutes or 10 years. You would be my first patient. And I said, I'll tell you what I'm willing to do. And she was bilateral, had a good posterior ridge. She was missing number 18, 19, 20. And on the other side, the same 31, 30, and 29. So she had a good ridge, and height to ridge looked pretty good. So I said, we'll try one side and see how it goes. I won't charge you for the implant, just for the bridge. So as you know, those were one-piece implants, immediate loaded, and we prepared an abutment tooth. So we made instantly a temporary fixed provisional bridge. So this went along fine. I didn't sleep the night before. I went over this a million times in my mind, the incision, the groove, and we scheduled from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock for this appointment. And we were done at 3:30. And my partner at that time, his name was Jack also. So he came back, he said to me, how did you like it? I said, Jack, I don't want to do anything else. This is all I want to do. I don't know if these work, but it's something you take that nature took away, and now you've recreated it, and they walk out with something. So then generally you finished in 6 weeks, you took the final impression and seated the bridge. So she says, this is great. What about the other side? I said, well, Irma, I'm an expert. This will be my second one. I have to charge you for that one. So she laughed. So make a long story short, Irma died. This was 1970. She passed away in October of 2000. That's 30 years later. And she had her implants. And before April of 2000, she was in hygiene. And I had a group of doctors from Japan in the office. And I said, do you want to see some history? This is my very first patient that I placed blade implants on. And they were pretty excited. So I said to Irma, I have some doctors from Japan. They would like to see what we did for you. She said, you tell them This is the only thing on my body that's lasted. She was a smoker. She had emphysema. She had her little oxygen tank with her, but she had a good sense of humor. And so that's, basically that started. And of course, that was early, and there weren't many of us doing it. There was a few of us doing a lot, and now there's a lot sometimes doing a few.
That's a fantastic story. I really enjoy that. Did you take any other courses other than Linkau's, and were blades the only thing available back then?
A lot of people came and to the local area, did some lectures. Ken Judy was one of them. I'm sure you know him. And then Paul Mentag, who was teaching subperiosteals. So he came and to Cincinnati area, Dayton. And so I went to his 2-day course. And then in Chicago, Dr. Leonard Molnick had live surgery courses at Northwest Hospital in Chicago. So that was in 1974. So I went there, and we actually could do a patient. He would do a demonstration and lecture one day, and the second day we got to do the bone impression and things like that. So we used to see early on a lot of edentulous patients with resorbed mandibles. We don't see those patients today like we did years ago. We see the terminal teeth cases, the patients that come in, their teeth are hopeless, advanced gum disease, advanced caries, just basically finished. But the patient that's edentulous with a mandibular denture, maybe they think that's the best there is. I don't know, but we see more numbers of the emergency, what I call the emergency implant, the broken root canal tooth, the onesie-twosies, or the terminal teeth. So we came back and we were doing subperiosteal. It was like epidemic. I was doing as many as 8 a week, subperiosteals. Dan Root Laboratory was casting them. And then I got more experience that I lectured at an AID meeting in Dallas, and a gentleman from Switzerland that had one of the best practices there. One of the top technicians in the world was his technician, Willie Geller, had me come back in 1977 to Zurich to do implants on his patients, and we developed a very close relationship. And I was going there 1 week every 3-4 months for 7 years until he was older than me, and he passed away. But had a lot of experience, got to do a lot of implants. So as some new devices came along, we took the courses back in around 78, 79, aluminum oxide ceramic implants came to market. Problem with those, they were one-piece implants, ceramic. They were biocompatible, but they weren't biofunctional. We didn't know that. And most of them fractured. And they integrated, and cutting those implants out was really tough because it was almost as hard as zirconium. And so cutting them to remove them was a difficult situation. And then I got involved with another root form implant from a gentleman, Tom Driscoll, which the implant was called Titanodont, and it was manufactured by a company called Miter, and they were owned by a German company, Boehringer Mannheim, and it was a 2-piece thinned implant. And I got an idea when I was working in Switzerland about an abutment that would go on with a locking taper. We had a patient that was an engineer for Straumann, and that Straumann, as you know, the implant company. This is Strawman, the locomotive company. They manufactured trains. And he showed us how you could take two pieces of metal and wedge them together, and it would stay. And I said to Dr. Feigl, gee, this is great. We could have abutments, have implants, have the female part take an abutment and tap it in, and you got it wedged. So that was the precursor of Bicon. Now, what happened is the history of that was that after 3-4 years, that material work hardened and they loosened. And the patient would come in with the abutment and the crown in their hand. So he'd put it back in and bang it on again. And 2 weeks later, they would come back in again with the crown in their hand. So then you would backfill with some cement and then put it on again. So I got tired of this, and I said to Driscoll, we got to make this abutment with a screw. Well, the company said, no, that's too expensive. We don't want to do that. And I said, okay, I'm done. I don't want to be involved with this anymore. And that was kind of the precursor of Stereos. But anyhow, getting back to education, another person that had a big influence on my life was Hill Tatum. He had these live courses in his office in St. Petersburg, and he was the first one to expose me to sinus lift procedures, sinus bumps with osteotomes, bone expansion. And so I took a lot of what I learned from him and see how we could make some changes. But so getting back to a finned implant, the other problem that we had was if you had bone loss, you had these fins exposed, and they were endotoxin generators. Bacteria would collect, so you would have to go in and smooth those fins off. So now you had an aesthetic problem. You had these metal stems sticking up. So then I said, an implant should be like a tooth. It should have a collar, like a neck of the cervical area of a tooth. And hence, that's where I got the idea for Stereos. And that had a 4mm collar, a 4mm neck, and machine collar. And it was a threaded implant, much like the similar body of Brennemark.
Dr. Hahn, could you tell me about the founding of the Midwest Implant Institute back in the 1980s?
Okay, well, I was doing these, getting back to these Synthedont, these ceramic implants. Dr. Heller in Columbus was one of the big lecturers and was doing a lot of research with it. And I was doing these courses in my office on Sundays where I was doing live surgery, and I was placing them. So Dr. Heller came down and one Sunday and watched, and also that's how I met Dr. Mish. Dr. Mish, this was in 1977, and he was there as well. So anyhow, we started talking. I calling, everybody knows him as Duke, and we were talking, and he said, hey, you know, this is pretty neat. You like teaching, I like teaching. I have room in Columbus. You have a lecture room. Why don't we form an institute, a teaching institute together? So I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So we met a couple other times. We decided we would do half of the courses in Columbus and half in Cincinnati. Well, he didn't enjoy doing the courses in Cincinnati, so we just kept it in Columbus. So we were teaching miter, the miter blade, and the titanodont. Miter also made blades, which I actually helped design that, which I don't know if you've seen those. They look like a grill I say like a 57 Cadillac. It's a checkered titanium grill, let's say. I said the neck and the abutment portion should be shaped like a Michelob beer bottle. So the tissue would have a nice smooth area and not a big undercut there. Anyhow, so we were teaching the titanodonts, the synthodonts, and blades. And then when I started being involved with Danar, now Danar took my idea of the 4mm machine collar. The owner of Danar was a gentleman by the name of Ralph Stern. He took it over from Niles Gachet. The Danar was in bankruptcy, and Ralph Stern was friends of the banker that had receivership of it, and asked him if he would like to take it over. And hence, they were marketing the Danar articulator. So anyhow, he said, we can make those implants. We have all the manufacturing. So hence the Stereos came to market. We had a very simple kit. We had two abutments. They were both cement in. We didn't even have a screw retained. It was screw retained direct to the implant. So then Ralph, Mr. Stern said, well, why don't we support the Institute, the Midwest Implant Institute? We'll help market the courses. So then I brought in, at that time then, Stereos. It was Stereos by Danar. So this went along for a few years, and then the head engineer for Stereos, Danar, Steve Herson, said, we're getting a lot of radiographs, and they're not losing any bone. The 2mm collar needs to be shrunk. The 4mm needs to be cut down to 2, because we can't make shorter implants. The shortest implant we had was 12. There were 2, 16 and 12. So we could then go 16, 14, 12, and 10. So that went along. And people liked the simplicity. We had a very simple kit. So this went along for a number of years until basically I wanted to develop something new again. And I had this vision one night in my sleep of a tapered implant. And so we can get into discussing my development of the Replace implant.
That's amazing that you were exposed to such integral people at those times. Let's talk about the development from Stereos to Nobel Biocare, and then how you developed the tapered Replace implant.
Let me just give you a little rundown on the history of the Replace. So like I said, one night I woke up out of my sleep. During the day before, the preceding day, if you get your implant glasses on, these kind of patients run like schools of fish. I had four different patients that needed a single implant in the aesthetic zone. So that would be 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I found myself, since I'm using a parallel walled implant, and I didn't want to penetrate the subnasal fossa, I found myself tilting the implant facial. So now I got the abutment is going to be way to the buccal. So then I have to use the severely angled abutment in order to restore it. So I'm thinking to myself, if the tooth came out, had a tapered root, why am I putting in a square peg in a tapered hole? If we look at the anatomy of the maxilla and the mandible, and we cross it in cross-section, we're looking at a series of triangles. So I jumped up out of bed, ran in my wife said, what's the matter? What's the matter? I said, nothing. So I ran in and I got a piece of notebook paper, and I drew a rough version of a tapered Replace implant. So I was excited. I called the president at that time, was Ken D'Arienzo. I said, Ken, I got an idea that's going to make you rich. And he said, what is it? I said, it's a tapered implant that's got a root shaped like a tooth. He said, if it's that successful, it'll kill my other products. Luz, at that time, they had a cylindrical implant, and they had the Stereos 2mm machine collar, but with like a Branimark body. I said, what you'll lose, you'll gain. So they were skeptical. And I said, just have Steve make me some. Make them 10 by 4.3 and give some to Dr. Peter Worley, Dr. Vassis, Dr. Rosenlick, Dr. Zosky, a bunch of different clinicians that had podium power. Mish, and everyone that did it, that put some in, loved it. So then they decided to start to launch it. So that's where my foreign travel came in. I was doing 3-4 trips to Europe. I was doing 3-4 trips to Asia, to Latin America. Evening presentation introducing the kit, the tapered kit, and the Replace implant. And it became like almost one of the most widely used implants in the world. And too bad I didn't own it. But there was a rumor that Stereos was going to merge with 3i. And Branimark realized, Nobel Biocare, if this happens, they could close up. Nobel Biocare could close up. They would be too strong of a competitor. They quickly made Stereos an offer. And it was a very big offer. And so they obtained it. They obtained Stereos. And the main reason was for Replace. Now, the other problem for Nobel was our implants were HA coated. And the Branimark people hated HA. But it turned out it was a very good surface. We had studies where we got a provisional ADA approval for immediate replacement, immediate load, provisional acceptance of the Stereos threaded implant. And we were going for final approval. And the gentleman that was working for Stereos, that was collecting the data, got fired for some reason. And he, to rebel or get revenge, he destroyed the work that we did. So we had 12 years between 4 clinicians. It's been published of that study. Anyhow, so the representatives, the salespeople for Branimark were hesitant to sell the HA-coated implants. So then Dr. Schupak developed the Tyounite surface, which is basically hooking implants to electrodes and causing minuscule explosions on the surface to make it somewhat create like porosity on the surface. But you can still do that with blasting, like we have on the Hahn implant, which is calcium phosphate that's blasted to the surface. And that has 30 years of clinical experience. So they obtained it. Things were going good, and everybody was happy, except me. I wanted to make improvements. I wanted to make it more soft tapping. Whatever we did, I wanted to keep the machine collar. Now, they were insisting, because I was doing the world tours where I was doing the live surgeries in India, Shanghai, Beijing, Sao Paulo, and they wanted me to do groovies, which has Tyounite to the top. And okay, so I'm a team player, I'll do that. And then after 3-4 years of groovies, especially posterior maxilla, I started seeing peri-implantitis that I hadn't seen before. So I called the engineer, Steve Herson. I said, Steve, I'm concerned. I'm starting to see some periimplantitis in poor quality bone, posterior maxilla. He said, go back to Select. So Replace Select, has that 2 millimeter machine collar, which I wanted them to keep. So anyhow, I had this drawings. I went to a company here in Cincinnati, and I had the drawings for what is known now as the Hahn implant, but we didn't call it that. So I went to Zurich twice. The home base for Nobel Biocare was Zurich, even though they're a Swedish company, but they moved the corporate headquarters to Zurich. I went twice, talked to their engineers, and their answer to me was, why should we change Replace? It's so successful. I said, why does Apple change iPhone? And now we got iPhone 10. But anyhow, they're successful with iPhone 6, whatever they had. Why do they change? So going back to my associate with Mr. Stern, Ralph Stern, who owned Danar, he said, we have to obsolete ourselves. We have to constantly improve. So I told Nobel Biocare a few years ago, had me come to Sochi, Russia. They gave me an award, a Founders Award in Sochi, Russia. That was right after the Olympics that were there for the Russian dentists, who I trained, most of them. I went to Russia doing courses in live surgery from 1999 to 2010. So a lot of the students who became very, very good were the lecturers on the program, and they insisted that I come as their teacher, and they wanted to give me this award. So I had a meeting with Richard Love, who was the CEO of Nobel Biocare, and I told him basically I'm not a fit anymore. I want to contribute more to implant dentistry. I have ideas. We need to do some improvements with Replace. I want to make it better. And he gave me the same answer, that we don't want to confuse the market. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to move on. And I didn't know where I was going to move on to. But anyhow, so I was lecturing in San Francisco at the ICUI. And two gentlemen came up who I've known for a number of years, Dave Casper and Greg Bensemeyer, who now basically is the strategic manager of Glidewell. And they came, met with my wife and I, and said, why don't you come with us? We have all the manufacturing. We would love to do your implant. We haven't seen it yet, but we know you've always been associated with something that's good. And we have the lab. We can do all your lab work, and we can manufacture. We can do necessary adjustments, whatever we need to do. You'll have direct input to it. And so they said, why don't you come to Orange County and visit us, and we can show you what we can do. So that's how it started with my associate with Glidewell in developing the Hahn implant.
That's a very fascinating progression that has a lot of big players involved. Why don't you walk me through how you developed the Hahn implant specifically, and what makes it so special?
All right. What I did is, from my special, Jeff, actually, we sit down and brainstorm at night, and he also had some input into it. So he said that you've been a proponent of the machine collar, so we need to go back to that. And so we kept the 1 millimeter machine collar. And then I said, well, I want to make the threads more aggressive. That's one of the downfalls of Replace, that we do a lot of immediate extraction. I do actually a lecture called the Emergency Implant, where we take the tooth out, prepare the site, And I like to hold the implant against the lingual portion, the palatal aspect, as it's going in to keep it away from the facial. So I said, I want the threads more aggressive, but he said, we can make them more horizontal, so you have more resistance to vertical load. Then the engineer at Glidewell, they're manufacturing the inclusive implants, so they have complete implant manufacturing. So they took my drawings and refined them some more, and then made me some prototypes that we could put in. So one of the features is the change of the pitch of the threads, the 1 millimeter collar with built-in platform shifting. Now, the studies show that the conical connection is better to seal bacteria, to prevent bacteria from getting in. So we wanted to keep the connection as a conical, and we wanted to keep it kind of universal. So we didn't want to have a one-of-a-kind connection where doctors, if they wanted to use abutments from other companies, they could still use them. So we kept the platform the same as Nobel Active and Nobel Conical. So we didn't want to confuse the market so much in that regard. And then what I try to think about is the things that aggravate me, the things I would like to have that you don't have. And that's what Jeff said. You know, he said, when I used to sell implants, and he used to be a salesperson for Stereos, he said, I would ask the doctor, what do you want? What would you like in a system that you don't have? I try to develop things, for instance, the healing abutments. I don't know if you've seen the healing abutments of an implant, but I made them like a mushroom so that when you suture, there's a circular lip to hold the tissue down. So it's not like putting a 10-legged cat in a bag where you're trying to hold the tissue and suture and keep the tissue from coming over the abutment. This stabilizes the tissue. So there again, that lowers your stress level. Then I do closed tray impressions. Not saying it's better than open tray. I don't do open tray as well as closed tray. I'm used to closed tray. I can take 10 implants, transfer them in an arch, and do a one try-in, and it fits like screws in a Swiss watch. And people have come and watched me do that. But there's a certain way when I take that impression, I make sure that I seat it in the impression, the transfers on the analogs. So what I did on the Hahn implant transfers, I made the grooves more definitive. So they actually, you hear them pop when it goes into the impression. So that's, again, something that we try to make it easier for general dentists that want to restore. And basically, I made the kit, we simplified the kit a little bit more than the replace kit with the tapered drills. Yeah, that's one of the other aspects that Nobel wasn't interested in. And one of the other reasons I told Richard that I'm not a fit. They didn't want to teach general practitioners anymore and expose them to the 2-day courses. I was teaching with the Perio Institute, Doug Prodlock owned a institute. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's an educational institute that teaches basic perio to general dentists. So they have a following of general dentists. So a little history of that. The president of AO, Academy of Osseointegration, went to Nobel, CEO at that time, was Domenico Scala, and told him, if you keep on out teaching GPs, that AO is going to, Academy of Osseointegration, is going to boycott Nobel. So then their head of education came to me at the Chicago Midwinter back in 2010 and said, you're done. We're not doing the Perio Institute anymore. But anyhow, I kind of got mixed up a little bit here. After that, Dr. Heller and I dissolved our being together with the Midwest Implant Institute. Carl Mish, Dr. Mish and I got together, and he said, why don't you come and be a clinical instructor at the Mish Institute? We could really use you. And I said, oh, that would be great. I'd like to do that, especially to be with you. I know I'll learn from you as well. So anyhow, he was teaching Brennemark, and when I came in, then Stereo said, well, we'll support too. Well, since you're there. So what we did was, in the mornings and live surgeries, that the doctors brought patients, one group did Brennemark, put Brennemark implants in, and then in the afternoon they switched, and then they would put Stereos in. So Stereos was much simpler than the Brennemark protocol. So a lot of them came to me and said, why should we do Brennemark? The Stereos is so much simpler. I said, well, that's up to you. So then Brennemark said to Carl, the Brennemark people, if you have Hahn keep coming there, we can't support this anymore. So I did this with Carl for 3 years. It was wonderful. I would sit on those lectures. We had a great friendship. His brother Craig and I were the clinical instructors. And so we had a good time. And it was a great experiences for everybody. The students, as you know, Carl was a great teacher, a great educator, and I can't say enough good things about him, really.
Yes, that's fantastic. I love your implant. I think it's a great implant. I love all the features about it, and use it a lot in my office very successfully.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you. But here's what happened toward the last 2 years with Carl. It's a tragedy. We lost him. Implant dentistry lost, one of the top educators in the world. But anyhow, about 2 years ago, we were at the ICY meeting in Las Vegas, and Carl was undergoing his chemo treatment. And I had a Hahn implant with me. And I said, Carl, I need your opinion. I want you to tell me. You've been involved in anything I've ever done. And I said, here's an implant. Look at it. Would you please? He looked at it. He turned it every which way but loose. He stared at it. And I said, don't you, if you think it's terrible, tell me. You won't hurt my feelings. Believe me. I respect you. He looked at it, and he looked up at me, and he said, I like it. And he said, I'll tell you why. You kept the machine collar, and I like the threads. So he said, in fact, why don't we teach it? Why don't we do that? Why don't you come back to the Institute? And I said, hey, you got it. And he says, since you have a license in California, you can do the live surgeries at Glidewell. So that's what we did. And the Mish Institute adopted it. We got Randy Resnick, who's a wonderful teacher. He's basically a clone of Carl. And he got on board, and that's all he's placing now are Hahn implants. And he's got tons of cases. So I'm helping on the hands-on on the Mish courses. The live surgeries are on hold right now. Glidewell is going to increase the size of their training center. It's beautiful, it's modern, it's up to date, but the Mish Institute needs more room because they have more participants. So when they get that done, then I'll get back to doing the live surgeries. But anyhow, I told Carl, you saying that is better than getting the good housekeeping seal of approval. because that means more than anything coming from you.
Yeah, he was a great inspirational leader for a lot of people, and I know he's definitely missed in the dental world, and that's got to mean a lot for you, for him to give you such an approval like that, and that's a great thing. Who else has been instrumental in your career that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I have to tell you, other person besides Carl that had a big effect on my career was Dr. Leonard Linkow. If it wasn't for him, and if it wasn't for the fact that we had to buy the kit and made us make a commitment, I wouldn't have been able to have this experience that I've had in implant dentistry. It's opened doors. I've been to places in the world that I would have never been to without implant dentistry, met people. Dr. Feigl was a great influence on me, and his perfectionism with the Swiss mentality that good isn't good enough. And the other person that had a big influence was the founder of the practice that I went into, that founded our practice, Dr. Greenberg. And he encouraged me to go to New York and take Dr. Linkow's course because he was very progressive. We had our own lab. He was the first to have his own in-house lab in Cincinnati, the first to have a Panorex X-ray, first for high speed, first doing ceramic on metal restorations. So he pushed me to keep going in implant dentistry, where the local community, the local dentists, viewed people doing implants as charlatans, snake oil salesmen. And so I met a lot of resistance with the local dentists in the community. I would go to dental society meetings, and at lunch, if I would sit down at a table, they would move away from me. So I would actually complain to Linkow that the profession, the other guys are giving me all this problem. And he was a tough guy. Hey, kid, he called me kid. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. So there were, a number of people I looked up. Hill Tatum, certainly, some of the big names. Even people today, the younger people, are so good. Mike Picas, you name them, that are out there. And people like yourself that are doing these podcasts and helping spread the word. We appreciate people like you doing this. Wish you were back in the 70s doing this. But anyhow, we survived the test of time. I was able to do a lecture at the Cincinnati Dental Society, actually. And I have a picture of a man, a knight in armor. And I said, this is the uniform I wore in dental society meetings back in the 70s. And one older guy came up to me at the end and he said, Jack, I know what you got at when you said that. We deserved that. We were wrong. You were right. But anyhow, that's the way it goes. So again, thanks, Philip. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You have been a big deal in pushing implants for the general dentist. And I think, a lot of people owe you that one. Was it really hard for a general dentist to get success in those early days?
You mean from a clinical point of view or from a practice point of view?
A practice point of view. I mean, that there was a lot of resistance to general dentists with the implant.
People, the patients that we saw needed help. And so they were open to what we were doing. There's no substitute for experience. Another person that was influential on me, really, was Dr. Bob James on subperiosteals. But I basically was the first to go over the external oblique before he was showing it. I just didn't show it, but on the subperiosteal design, where he went along the ascending ramus. But he popularized it, and he lectured on it. So we learned that we need to have stability. Well, what we learned in the difference in the mandible and the maxilla with blade implants. I still have hundreds of blade implants that have been in over 30 years that look like the day we put them in. But we had primary stability at the time of placement, and we were able to control the functions. When we had poor quality of bone, posterior maxilla, we didn't have good primary stability. There was micro movement. There was movement. The blades got encapsulated with soft tissue, and eventually they were lost. So again, I looked at it in the early days. If we did have a failure, and we learned something, it wasn't a failure. It was a course. Now, I didn't have a hard time getting patients because I had a reporter from the newspaper that I did an implant on, a subperiosteal actually. He couldn't wear a lower denture. And he said, "You changed my life. Why don't we do an article in the newspaper?" And that started it. And that started the jealousy with the dental society, because in those days you weren't allowed to advertise. But it wasn't advertising. It was an informative article. So we were getting a lot of phone calls. The other aspect is another person I treated was the host of a TV show. It was the Bob Braun show. He was like Johnny Carson or David Letterman. We had a local show, but he was in 105 cable markets. And he had a problem losing teeth. And I saw him at a party, and we shared a common hobby, automobile. So I went up, I said, "Bob, how you doing?" He said, "I don't feel." I said, "You don't look good. What's wrong?" He says, "My teeth, my mouth." I said, "Be at my office at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." He says, "Tomorrow's Sunday." I said, "I know that. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. Let me see what's going on." So anyhow, he came in. Somebody made him a huge partial in the back. He was unilateral, missing the posterior molars and a bicuspid. And made him, and his tongue was constantly rubbing on him, and he couldn't. His claim to fame is he could speak. He was great at announcing, doing commercials, selling products. He was probably one of the best announcers, but it was rubbing his tongue, and he said it was destroying my career. So I said, "Here's what we're going to do for you." So I did a blade and a bridge, repair to buy. And he said, when we were done, he said, "You changed my life. You got to come on the show. You got to talk about dentistry. You can be the resident dentist," because he had a pediatrician, he had a dermatologist. So once a month, I was on this show, and we would always get something about an implant. Once in a while, we would have a patient in the audience, that's mine, and he would have him stand up. And he always asked me in the green room what we wanted to talk about. So we were getting 200 phone calls a week, a lot of letters and phone calls, which we answered. And this was bringing a bunch of patients. I thought it would never end. And then they had a new producer who came in and who does the Jerry Springer show. And Bob told me that our show's going to go. They're going to ruin the show. We're going to be done. They think only young people buy these products, so they're going to terminate. I said, "Don't tell me that." So they get up one morning, read the paper, and the Bob Braun show has been canceled. And he had a huge following. When my children were younger, we would go to the grocery store, and people would point, "That's him, that's him." And they're pointing at me because I was on once once a month, and that's when I could hear good. So we had a lot of fun. I demonstrated that, put him under nitrous. So we had a lot of good times with that.
That's amazing that you were able to get that kind of exposure, because getting into implants for quite a while was difficult for a lot of general dentists. And I think you were able to pave that pathway for other people. How do you think you have broken some of those barriers for other general dentists, and how do you continue to do that?
There are people that are open-minded, that want to learn. And the thing that I did at any courses I did, and this was one of the common things that people said when I was working with the Perio Institute, said to Doug and other people, Jack doesn't show us how good he is. He tries to show us how good we can be. And that's how I've always tried to teach. I put myself in the people that are taking the course's place. You're giving up 1 or 2 days. You've got to be able to do something on Monday. And I start my lectures out, even today, is I'm not going to show you a bunch of studies, a bunch of esoteric stuff. I'm going to show you some ideas, share some ideas. It's not that I'm smart. It's I've learned through experience. I've learned through success and failure. And I want you to be able to take something from this lecture and say it was worthwhile for me to give up this day and be able to do it on Monday. So again, doing that and being exposed enough to meetings and lecturing, talking to young people. A lot of younger people like to come up and talk, and I try to give them advice, things to do, talk about marketing, try to expand it. Now, Jeff's a big part of that. When I first got into computers, like most of us, we just figured out how carbon paper works, and now all of a sudden we have all these things. So Jeff took over the marketing, doing our Facebook, our website. I do an ad every Sunday. We do a strip ad. I change the pictures. We put a before and after. Some of the befores are not so nice looking, but the people that need us, that are like that, patients will come in and even bring the ad and say, that's me. So we advertise all on 4 specials. Jeff helps write the ads, and as well as promoting it on our website to Facebook. And you have to do it all. There's no secret to marketing. There's a secret to talking to the patient, and I'm sure you know that because I looked in your website. So, but anyhow, I make it simple for the patient. My consults don't take more than 20 minutes. I look at what their problem is, explain to what the solutions are. Right now on all on 4s, I'm doing all Bruxers. I'm not doing any more acrylics. They break, the teeth pop off, the flanges break. They were a nightmare. So I'm doing all Bruxers. So I have an upper and lower Bruxer that we made, 2 for 1 patient. So I have an extra sample, and I throw it on my marble counter, and the thing bounces, and I show them that it's not going to break, chip, crack, and tell them it doesn't stain, and here's what we can do. And I tell patients that if I need to do more when I'm in there, there's no add-ons. And I have a treatment coordinator who's dedicated. She's been with me for 40 years. She takes all the phone calls. She probably violates things that Roger Levin and all these practice management gurus tell you, because she'll spend an hour with a patient on the phone. But when a patient comes in, they ask for her, which is fine, because she's the one that's going to give them the fee, not me. So I tell patients, they ask about cost and insurance. I say, I'm going to tell you everything you want to know about your treatment. I can even tell you everything you don't want to know. But this is the thing. So it's just 3 of us. I used to have a big office at 13 people. So it's my treatment coordinator, my surgical chair side has been with me 30 years. She knows the Hahn, replace the active system backwards and forwards for the last 3.5 years. That's all I placed is Hahn. So, and restored. So, anyhow, that's it. We don't try to make it fancy. And then we give them the options as you do, that we use both Care Credit and Lending Club. And we try to impress upon them that our fees are going to be less than the team approach because we're doing everything like you do. And so that's a good marketing aspect. But people, even though you advertise in a newspaper, they will go into your website and look at your website. A lot of people say, well, newspaper's done. There's still a certain portion of the population, especially older people, that still like the paper.
Where would you like to see the field of implants moving forward in the future?
Well, of course, everybody's into guided surgery. In fact, the Hahn kit, we simplified the guided kit. There's no, you don't have to use the spoons, which are cumbersome. So we simplified that on the shape, on the drills, the hub of the drills, serve as the spoons. So we simplified that. And as they get more and more into the computer technology and guided surgery, I'm sure that there's going to be tons more things in the future. 3D printing is going to be huge. The main thing is deliver the service cost effectively, because you have to remember that the people that have lost teeth are in the lower income level. They haven't had good care when they were younger. Jobs on a lower scale, a lot of them are service people. So we have to try to deliver the service cost effectively and predictability wise. So whoever thought we would be doing things that we do with CT scanning when we first put in our first implant. Everything was periapical and a Panorex. And then offering alternative treatments to patients, the 2 implant solutions for the mandible with locators, at least getting them started. And maybe their financial situation will change in the future where I tell patients we can add 2 more legs to the table and then we can make it fixed. And that's what we did with the Hahn implant. We try to price it so that to make it affordable. And a lot of these big complicated cases which involve big costs are not done as much as everybody thinks too. Because a lecturer gets on a program, they mostly, he or she wants to do some razzle-dazzle. So they'll show you cases that they've done a bunch of block grafts. They've done stack grafting, where they do a block and then they add a block to that and this and that. So still the majority is Dr. Gordon Christensen says, the majority of the implants that are placed are still onesies, twosies. The doctors that refer to specialists don't want to do these big, complicated restorative cases either. So that's where the patient can benefit by going to an experienced implantologist, because they can handle the big, complicated restorative cases and do that at a lower cost than the team approach as well. So implant designs, I have some more ideas. We just kind of have to take it a step at a time. The thing that we have going for us with the Hahn implant is the association with the laboratory. Glidewell receives 500 implant cases a day. They have an experienced implant restorative department. The technicians are not just looking at something for the first time. So you have somebody that can do manufacturing of the product, can constantly update it if they want, and if it's needed, and the laboratory support. So that's an advantage of the system as well. And they can keep updating that restorative technology. If you have the opportunity to visit Glidewell, it's well worth it to see how a lot of this is done robotics, how the hybrids and zirconia implant bridges are milled with robots and things like that. And they said they don't have to pay health insurance and they always show up. They said to me, that's the advantage of the robot.
Yeah, I've been to Glidewell Laboratories and toured the implant manufacturing facility as well, and it is very impressive. And the work they do there is great, and the implant facility is very nice. I guess to kind of wrap things up, what do you enjoy doing at this point in your career, having kind of been there and done it all? What do you enjoy the most at kind of the point in your career you're at now? Is it the lecturing? Is it the placing the implant with your name on it, or is it the development or teaching? What do you get a thrill out of these days?
My biggest passion are two things. One is surgery, and the second, and I have to put them probably equal, is lecturing. I love lecturing. I love the fact that we can leave our mark. That's one of the things I said to Nobel. I want to continue to contribute to implant dentistry. And it's been good to me, and I feel that I owe it to be good to implant dentistry. And so those are the two things that I like most. I don't like the fact that we have to market like we do. That's the hardest part. I tell the doctors that once you've done these enough times, it's like tying your shoes. The procedures aren't that difficult, and we've simplified it. We've simplified the diagnosis, the treatment, the surgery, the restorative. So the hardest part is patients, management, communication, and getting the patients to commit. And if we have a day of all consultations, let's say, I'm more tired than if I had a day that I would be doing an 8-hour surgery one time. It's the fact of passion. Some people hate the surgery. That's why in my office, when I was with the group, my partner said, "Do you like it?" I said, "I love it. I don't want to see teeth. The only thing I want to do with teeth is put them in the waste can." He said, "Well, since you like it, why should I do it? I don't like it. It makes me nervous." So that's, some people, they don't want to do surgery. But to me, that's the creative part of it.
Yeah, I can relate with that. That's definitely where my passion is with the surgery too. What would you like your legacy to be with implant dentistry?
I didn't want to name the implant the Hahn implant, and they did, because they said you're known as the father of the tapered implant, and rather than, they thought that naming it something else would be just another also rant to want to know that it is different. So that alone is a big thing, because people who didn't know who I was get to know. Some of them still may not know who Hahn is with the Hahn implant. But I just want to be able to, the biggest thing when I'm at meetings, and since I've done so much hands-on courses over the years, when I was with Nobel, I did 4 courses at their training center for a number of years in Yorba Linda. But dentists will come up to me and say, "You taught me my first implant. You changed my life." And I kid him. I said, "Do you want to hit me?" "No, I'm happy. I'm happy you did." So, that's one of the things is basically makes me feel good. And that's my legacy. That's what I was there. I didn't want to do these courses for them not to do something. So they came up and said to me, "You taught me my first implant." And a lot of people are more well-known than I am that took their first course from me. So the students become better than the teacher. And that's one thing that Lenny could never accept, Dr. Linkow. I said, that's a tribute to you. A tribute to a good teacher is that their student becomes better than them, that they were that much stimulated and and develop the passion to learn and do it.
I think that's the greatest thing is when you can, share with others and teach other people. And it's amazing that you've been able to, touch so many people in such a memorable way. That's got to be great. So I think we've wrapped up everything that I've wanted to try to get all the stories out of you I could, and I think we did a great job of that. So I look forward to meeting you in person here soon at one of your events. And I just want to say thank you to all the general dentists out there that have learned from you, and you've definitely paved a path for all of us to follow. And we've got big shoes to fill. But I've really enjoyed hearing about your stories and learning more about all your personal experiences.
Thank you, Philip. Just one other thing. We have Glidewell is having a symposium in Dallas in November 17th. And hopefully maybe you would be there, that I can meet you in person, and would love to meet you in person. And thank you. Thank you for allowing us to share on this podcast. Thanks, Jeff, for helping me as well.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to meeting you soon.
Thanks, Philip. Thank you.